Smith, Race Review Online. We're back for IndyCar, a week off, and the series is back as we crossed over the first half point, entering the second point of the season. That kicks off this Sunday for the Honda Indy Toronto. It's a Peacock-only weekend. They started this last year, where practice qualifying and even the race is all on Peacock. It's all streaming. No NBC, no USA, Peacock only. 1:30 Eastern kicks off coverage on Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock green flag. So with that said, let's preview the race. Here are the 5 things that I'm watching for Sunday's Honda Indy Toronto live on Peacock and IndyCar Radio Network. The first point, I feel like this is Chip Ganassi Racing's race to lose. Team Penske has won 3 of the last 5 Honda Indy Torontos. However, the 2 that they didn't win, Scott Dixon won, including last year's race. Dominated. This was his first win of the season. It kind of got his year going. More on that in this next point. But the years that Penske won or didn't win, Scott Dixon won. The years that Penske won, Scott Dixon was second. That's 10 straight top 10 finishes, including 4 wins and a runner-up in that span. He qualifies well there, too. As we know, in IndyCar, qualifying is everything, especially on these street courses. He started in the top 10 in all 14 tries that he's been to Toronto, including 11 of which he's made the Fast 6. Since 2015, the Iceman's qualified 4th, 1st, 5th, 2nd, and 2nd. That kind of tells you right there he's going to be not only a Fast 6 threat, but probably a pole threat, at least the front row. On street courses this season, Dixon has shined. He's finished 3rd in St. Pete. Oh, he's also, granted, he was last at Long Beach, but he was also running up front and had an incident with Pato Ward. He kind of punted him in the tire barriers. That's the only reason he was last, because he had a top 5 car prior. And he was 4th in Detroit. So he's going to be around the mix on Sunday. But it's not just him you have to deal with in the Ganassi camp. Alex Palou, 6th a year ago, 8th, 5th, and 1st, respectively, on street courses this season. He's won 4 of the last 5 races this year, including 3 in a row. So you know he's going to be a factor. He seems to have been a factor more times than not all season. So I don't know why that would change on Sunday. Marcus Ericsson, the 3rd Ganassi driver, is 5th last year. In 3 street course races this season, he won and he finished 3rd. So that's 2 podiums and 3 tries. And finally, the last driver of their team, he's a rookie, but he's been strong. Marcus Armstrong, 11th, 8th, and 8th on the 3 road or street course races this season, rather. So that Ganassi camp, they're 2 for 3 on street courses this season. They won the final 2 races on them last year. So that's 5 straight street course wins for that organization, which leads me to believe this is probably their race to lose. But as we've seen in the NTT IndyCar series, that has happened before. Teams have lost the lead. Teams have had bad pit strategy or caution come out in the wrong time. So the door is still open for somebody else, and you'd be foolish to look over Team Penske. However, they won the first 3 street course races last year. They've not won any of them since. And they've not honestly been as close as the Ganassi group. But if you want to bring them into it, they've won 7 of the last street course races between these 2 organizations and 13 of the last 19 in general. They've also had 5 straight wins in Toronto, and they've had 5 of the 9 podium spots available on street course races this year. And, oh, by the way, out of the 9 races we've run this season, they've combined to win 8 of them. So that's why you've got to throw Penske in the mix. However, I'm a little leery in the standpoint that, yes, they won the first 3 street races last year. I keep mentioning that for a reason. They won 3 of them, so they've got to be in the mix. However, they're 0 for 5 since. In Toronto last year, they finished 9th, 10th, and 15th. In Nashville, the final street course race last year, 2nd, 6th, 11th. This year, 3 races, 7th, 13th, 17th in St. Pete, 6th, 9th, and 10th in Long Beach, and 2nd, 7th, and 10th in Detroit. That's just 2 podiums in the last 5 tries after having 3 straight wins. So you got to look. Let's look at driver specific then. Joseph Newgarden, 2 wins in his last 6 Toronto starts, 5 top 10s in that same span. Prior to that, his best finish was 11th in 5 tries. He's made the 2nd round in each of the last 6 Toronto starts. However, he's been just the top 10 guy there. And in this next point, you're going to see why top 10s aren't going to cut it for Newgarden. He was 17th in St. Pete, 9th in Long Beach, and 10th in Detroit this year on street course races. He's finished either 9th or 10th in 2 of the last 3 years at Toronto, too. So could be a top 10 play, but not necessarily a race winner right now. Will Power, speaking of race winner, he's won this race 3 times, 2007, 2010, and 2016. However, his last 4 finishes in Toronto, 21st, 18th, 18th, and 15th, respectively. He has just 2 podiums in his last 12 Toronto starts. 8 of those 12 races, he's finished 15th or worse. He's qualified 15th and 16th the last 2 years, though, so it's not like he's probably going to be starting up front. And that's why, in saying all that, yes, he was runner-up in Detroit. Yes, he was 7th in St. Pete. Yes, he was 6th in Long Beach. I'm kind of fading him right now. He just doesn't seem like a race winner per se. Maybe a top 10, but not necessarily a race winner. Another one, Scott McLaughlin, the final Penske guy, 9th a year ago, street course races this season, 13th, 10th, and 7th. I just don't see him much past top 5 point. That's about it. That's why I feel like the door is open maybe for somebody else. And it's probably going to be a Honda because Honda's 3 for 3 on street course races this season, counting Ganassi's wins last year. They've won 5 in a row. And if you want to look at the next best Honda team, it's got to be Andretti Autosport, right? 6 front row starts in 9 races this season. The only problem is they've just not delivered on Sundays. And if you look at it, they probably should have won 5 of the 9 races this year. Grosjean had a win at St. Pete, crashed with McLaughlin with 29 to go while battling for the lead. Barber, wrong end of the pit strategy. He also qualified well there. Colton Herta, he should have won the last 2 races. He won the pole at both, but he had problems on race days in those. So you mix that with Kyle Kirkwood winning the pole and dominating the race win in Long Beach, which, oh, by the way, is a street circuit. That should be at least 4 to 5 wins for the Andretti camp right now, which is why I feel like that plus Toronto's success has got to be a reason. I think that they're probably going to be the one more to capitalize over Team Penske, and that's if Ganassi falters. Hurt has won twice on street courses before. He qualified on the pole here last year. He finished second. He's got 2 straight poles on the season. Definitely a guy you got to keep an eye out. Grosjean, as I just mentioned, should have won St. Pete, was strong at Long Beach. He's qualified first, third, and third on street course races this season, so we know he'll be up front. Kirkwood won the pole and won Long Beach. Top 5 starting spot at St. Pete, even though we crashed. Detroit had a fast car. He was third in both practices, crashed in qualifying there too. He was punted on the first lap of that race, fell back to last as a result of that, and still climbed up to finish 6th. What happens if he can maximize his qualifying day and not crash, start up front, and also not get punted on the first lap? I think he's going to be a factor this weekend with that said. The final team, I got to pivot back to Chevrolet because that's probably the last team that can win this race, and that'd be McLaren. Pato O'Ward, after Grosjean and McLaughlin wrecked in St. Pete, Pato took over the lead. Unfortunately, had an engine malfunction, kind of sputtered coming with 2 to go. Got it back going again, but he lost the lead and finished second. Wrong into the qualifying strategy in Long Beach, had the wrong tires, wrong choice. Got him eliminated from making the Fast 6. That kept him out of it. In Detroit, he inherited the lead. He pit for the first time. Slow stop. Didn't get the tire tightened. Try to overcome it and crash. So you know what Pato O'Ward can do. Alexander Rossi has got a pair of top 5 finishes on 3 street course starts this season. He's always been solid in Toronto. 2nd, 8th, 3rd. He's finished 23rd last year, but that's because him and now teammate Felix Rosenqvist had contact because late in the race, Rossi started 4th. Those 2 were battling for a podium, so we know what he can do there. And as I just mentioned, Rosenqvist did finish on the podium last year. He was 3rd. He was 3rd the last time out in Detroit, 7th in Long Beach. So I feel like McLaren might have passed Penske on street course pace too. So you got to think the pecking order would be Ganassi, Andretti, McLaren, Penske. Is probably those 4 teams. And the reason I mentioned those 4, they've won all 27 races if you go back to the start of last season. If you go back into 2021, they've won 37 straight races just between those 4 organizations. This Aeroscreen era, that's the start of 2020. 57 races run. They've won 54 of them, 94.7%. So the only 3 times that a non-Big 4 team has won actually occurred at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The 2020 Indy 500, Takuma Sato won for Rahal. 2021 Indy 500, Elio Castroneves won for Meyer Shank Racing. And the 2021 GMR Grand Prix in the month of May, the road course race, Rinus VeeKay won that too. Everything else has been won by Penske, Ganassi, McLaren, or Andretti. That's why I mentioned those are probably going to be the teams to watch this weekend, which leads me to the next point. 2 drivers for those teams, specifically Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden I'm watching because the points race for the second half of the season, you got to talk points, but right now it's not much of a race. Alex Palou is dominating. He's opened up over these last 10 races. If you go to the last year's season finale that he won by a half of a minute and go to this point, that's 10 races. He's won half of them. He's won 5 races. He's on a string of races. And this is where he's qualified these last few events. 3rd, 1st, 1st, 3rd, 4th. He's finished first, fourth, first. He's led 220 of the 520 laps. That's 42.3% in the process. He's got eight top five finishes in a row. So that's a guy that we know is probably going to be towards the front on Sunday. 24 top five finishes in his last 42 races run overall. However, if anybody's going to make this a race, that's why I'm watching Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden specifically, and because they lived this deficit. Scott Dixon in 2020, this was the COVID years, 14 races run, so it's a little bit of a short season. It's three less races than we're running this year. He won each of the first three races, and he had a top two result in four of the first five overall. On August 29th that year, he won at Gateway, and at that point, it was a 6 top two in 8 races, so it's kind of on a streak Palou was on. Here's the thing. Joseph Newgarden was 117 points down that day. He nearly came back and won because there's 6 races left in that span. He had 5 top 4 finishes. 4 of those 5 he finished in the top 2 compared to Dixon, 1 podium and 2 top 5s. That's why I'm looking at these two because they're the closest to Palou right now, and they're seasoned vets. They're champions. They know what to do. Plus, these are some really good tracks coming up for these guys. At Toronto, they've combined to won 6 of the last 10 there, including 4 of the last 6 and 3 of the last 4. Dixon just finished runner-up in Mid-Ohio. Newgarden is a 2-time winner there. After this, we go to Iowa. Newgarden's won 6 of the last 8 oval races in general, including 2 of 2 this season. He's always a threat at Gateway in Iowa. He's won 3 races. Dixon, I got to throw this in, was 0 for 17 at Iowa. He's never won. But he also has 5 straight top 5s, and he has a pair of runner-ups in that span at that. So if you look at that, that's the next 3 races coming up. Toronto this Sunday and a doubleheader at Iowa next week. And look what those two can do. But they can't afford to have Palou beat them anymore. And not just beat them, they've got to win. So can they win and capitalize this weekend in Toronto? That's where it starts. Because after that stretch, you go to Nashville. Dixon was runner-up in the inaugural year, and he won last year. So this little 4-race stretch here is going to really shape how this rest of the season goes, because Palou, if you really look at it, he has struggled on these types of tracks. Alex Palou finished 11th, 14th, 6th, and 13th at Iowa, 15th, 12th, 20th, and 9th at Gateway. They're not really good on short ovals. And he mentioned he was a rookie at Toronto last year, and he finished 6th. So the door is open. It's can Newgarden and Dixon come through it? And they not just come through, they got to storm through it. It starts this weekend in Toronto. So that's why I'm going to watch what they do this weekend. The next point are pit cycles. In IndyCar, there's not a lot of cautions. And a street course, track position's kind of back. 2 of the 3 races were won from the pole, the other from 4th. So if you go back to all of last season, 5 of the 8 were won from the front row and 6 of the 8 from the top 2 rows. And it's gone to the question, have teams gotten smarter or these tracks gotten better? 18 of the last 20 races in Toronto, including 29 to 31 overall, were won from the top 7 spots. That tells you track position and qualifying are key, which is why the undercut and overcut using the alternates in their primaries are going to be a strategy play, because Palou lately has gone the opposite of what these guys have done. He's forced them to mistakes, and he's won races because of that strategy. So I'm curious on those pit cycles if that's going to happen this weekend, because if that's your way to beat them, you're going to have to start swinging for the fences if you're a Dixon and Newgarden and an Ericsson. So they're going to have to maybe go join Palou's strategy, which do you make mistakes by that? So pit cycles and how these guys starting the tire strategy is something to be watched, because that can make or break this race, not only Sunday, but the championship moving forward. The next point, well, we had a scary wreck in Mid-Ohio, if you guys remember, right, where Simon Pagenaud in the Saturday morning practice, as you'll see here in the video, got a little squirrely. His brake line failed. And going down the backstretch, that's a fast part of the track, and he flipped it over in. He got out of the car, luckily walked away, but unfortunately, he wasn't clear to drive. He thought he was good, but taking a tumble like that, concussion symptoms can be delayed. Sunday morning, he wasn't clear to drive. Connor Daly stepped in. He had to come to Indianapolis this week to get reevaluated, which they all thought would be a formality. He should be fine. Well, unfortunately, he was still exhibiting symptoms, which you take a tumble like that, that's going to happen. You're probably going to be banged up a little bit. He still is. So Meyer Shank Racing, instead of going outside the team this week, they had some time to prepare for this. They went inside the team, and they chose sports car driver for him, Tom Bloomquist. So that's what I want to watch this weekend is what can he do? And also, I'm going to watch Ryan Hunter-Reay. I'm going to throw him in this same category. Ryan Hunter-Reay is making his first street course race in 23 months. So with Tom Bloomquist making his first IndyCar start ever, and both of these kind of in reserve roles, I want to see how they do on the streets of Toronto. In the case of Bloomquist, this weekend is, bar none about it, it's a bona fide tryout, to say the least. I don't want to say too much, but I do know both drivers of Meyershank Racing do not have contracts for next year yet. I've heard Bloomquist's name brought up that could be potential one of the drivers in those seats. He had a test at Sebring in 2022 in the fall. It was kind of a, if you win the Rolex at Daytona, and I know you kind of interested in IndyCar, we'll give you a test. Well, they won and he got a test. Word was he did pretty well. And he's been saying, hey, after a second straight Daytona 24-hour one in January, I want to try IndyCar. Well, here you go. Here's an opportunity. So I would love to see what he can do in this weekend. Granted, it's going to be hard to put a lot because he's never been to the track. He's only been in a test situation. It's a steep learning curve. There's walls on both sides. And really for him, he hasn't been in this car. It's been 8 months. So Bloomquist also is taking over a car that Simon Pagenaud did well there last year. But however, Simon Pagenaud hasn't done well this year. That's the reason why both drivers are free agents. So it'll be curious to see what he can do with it, especially with the tryout. And for Hunter-Reay, he's won 18 times in IndyCar. He knows what he signed up for. If this car was operating on cylinders, he wouldn't be here to begin with. That's why the start of Road America was more of a learning experience for that team. It was kind of, hey, let's get in, let's learn, let's reevaluate, because we got a week between Road America and Mid-Ohio. They're similar tracks, so we can take what we learned, apply it from Mid-Ohio, and see if it works, and blah, blah, blah. That was kind of the hard but easier part because it was more lackadaisical, laid back. Let's figure out what's going on. And he improved 10 positions to finish 17th at Road America. So they were getting some good info. Now it's Toronto. This is a completely different challenge. The last time Hunter-Reay's raced there was 2019. The last time he's been in a street course race in general was 2021 at Nashville in August. So he's got a tall task ahead of him. He has made 16 starts at Toronto. He's got a podium finish for 3 straight years. He had a victory in 2012. However, ECR, it's not like they've had good street course program over the last few years. Connor Daly in this ride on street course races last year, 21st, 12th, 12th, 20th, and 17th. Renus BK, 6th, 13th, 16th, 13th, and 12th. They each finished outside the top 10 in St. Pete, Long Beach, and Detroit, too. So nobody's saying Hunter-Reay is probably going to jump in and necessarily win this race on Sunday. And I don't even know if he's going to finish in the top 10, but it's about learning. So I'm curious with Bloomquist and Hunter-Reay. That's why I grouped them together. What can they do? What can they learn? And what can they show this weekend? The next point, I'm watching Ray Hall, Letterman, Landing, and Racing, and here's why. They kind of started turning their season around at Mid-Ohio. And this point last year is also the time they turned their season around. Graham Rahal, they tested at Sebring. They kind of had a similar start. We're kind of down. They went to Sebring, middle of summer between Mid-Ohio and Toronto, and learned a lot, and they applied it for the season. They took off. Graham Rahal, 5 top 10s over his final 8 races, including a pair of top 5 results, 4 top 10s in his previous line, the best finish of 7. So you can see how much he turned on. Christian Lundgaard ended up being Rookie of the Year. 5 top 10 finishes in that same final 8 races, including a pair of top 5s, and he was a runner-up finish in the Indy road course. By comparison, 2 top 10 finishes in the first 9 races. So they really turned things around after that test, which was coming into this weekend. However, what can they do this time? Graham Rahal kind of tempered those expectations at Mid-Ohio. And this is what he said then. Detroit was a major disappointment, which worries me a little bit for Toronto, because I think there's still a lot of questions for us in our street course package. And he's right. If you look at RL and street course races, St. Pete, they were 6th, 9th, and 22nd. Long Beach, 12th, 13th, 14th. Detroit, 16th, 17th, 25th. However, Christian Lundgaard did a media availability with us this week, and he does not share the same outlook as what Graham Rahal said. In fact, he said quite the opposite. And here's a clip of what we're about to watch. You can hear his response when asked about Toronto this weekend.
Honestly, I do think that we're going to have a fast car. We made a lot of progress going into that weekend last year. I think at the time in the season, it was my best qualifying result. And I think at the time as well, it was the best finish that we had that year up until that point. So thinking about that, I think we knew that we were making progress that part of the year last year, and already now we've seen an increase in performance early in the season, I mean, we outperformed ourselves compared to last year in Mid-Ohio. So we just need to stay on that trajectory. And I think going into Toronto, it's very important that we keep our head cool and kind of focus on our own stuff. And then I guess, I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but I do think that we can come away with at least a match of a fall through, potentially even a podium.
So, as you can see, that's complete opposite of what Graham Rahal said from Mid Ohio. And also on the call was Lucretia Costa asked a very good question. And she kind of asked why Lundgaard and Rahal, and even Harvey too, the results are vastly different. Lundgaard's thriving with RLL. Well, Rahal mentioned last race, that the cars are finally getting geared to what he can deliver out of them. And Lundgaard has not really had that much bad luck with it, and he's shown more than these other drivers. And she kind of asked him why. What's the difference between him and Rahal? And I thought his answer was pretty intriguing a little bit. And here's his response to that question.
Put it in perspective, you know, we might be teammates, but we're still all competitors. And if I'm in a position where I'm on a completely different strategy that doesn't seem to play out at the moment, you know, I'll let them, give them an easy pass. But other than that, we're going to race hard and all these kind of things. But I think because I'm so young and I've driven a lot of cars in Europe, that's in my opinion quite difficult to drive, and I've also driven some easy ones. And just my experience with the F1 team back in a few years ago when I was doing a lot of simulator work, you're just very involved and you drive a lot of different cars, a lot of different, I wouldn't necessarily just call it setups, but the evolution of different cars. And you understand the differences and how you need to drive certain cars. And you just, I wouldn't say you develop the skill, but you sort of do. I mean, you just get a better understanding and you improve your talent. And I guess that's why on certain occasions, Graham will complain more about the car than I will, because I kind of just get on with it. And we saw the car this weekend was in a good window for him at Mid Ohio, and he was fast. I mean, there is no doubt that Graham is a good driver. The same for Jack. But I just think I can do things that they can't do just because of my previous experiences.
Which that is interesting, saying that about a teammate, and we've all known Graham has been vocal about these cars, and he's basically saying, well, I can do things that he can't do. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that's intriguing. Graham had a top 5 in this race last year. He started on the pole at Mid Ohio last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was kind of worried about this weekend where Lundgaard's not, which is why I'm watching them and wondering if they're going to struggle coming up, because Iowa's going to struggle for RLL too. So you got Toronto this weekend, doubleheader in Iowa, followed by Nashville in August. And if you look at ovals this year, granted they're on super speedways, Rahal finished 18th, 19th, and 24th as their 3-car outfit, and 18th, 19th, and 33rd. And also you could probably say 34th because Graham Rahal missed the show, the one and only. But Lundgaard is not worried about that, because we could say, well, there's 2 street course races and these 2 oval doubleheader, they could struggle. Lundgaard doesn't feel that way. He feels like there's momentum, and there's a lot of these tracks at the end of the schedule he feels favor them further. And so I asked him about that. And here's what he said about his outlook as far as the season moving forward and why they've been as successful as they have so far.
Here soon.
Well, I hope so. But honestly, right now, obviously we're optimistic. Leaving Mid Ohio, I think last year the best car qualified 13th, which was just not transferring from the first qualifying group. And this year we had 2 cars in the Fast 6 and 1 on the front row, and me in 5th, and we had Jack up in 11th as well. So just looking at that specific race from last year to this year, we moved a lot, and we really struggled at Mid Ohio last year. Now we're coming into a track where we didn't necessarily struggle as much, but we built a good foundation for Nashville at Toronto last year, and we were very competitive at Nashville. So coming in here, I do think just looking at that it is sort of a turning point. At least I hope so. I mean, we want to continue building on what we're building on now, and basically don't really leave those performances.
So that's where I'm curious where they could be, because he told me his goals later were he feels like he almost get a top 5 in points. And with these races coming up, he's right. He was good in them last year. And if he doesn't share the same concerns that Graham does, then let's see what they can do. So that starts this weekend in Toronto. That's why I want to watch them as a whole too. So these are the 5 things I'm watching. Thanks for tuning in to this preview show. Hope you like these latest editions. We're going to do this further forward for the season. Also, be sure to check out our NASCAR preview show, which we taped on Tuesday for this weekend's race at Loudon, and everything Prime Sports Network has to offer. Please like the channel, like this articles, preview shows, and clips. Subscribe, and we'll talk next week. IndyCar's got Iowa doubleheader, so we'll probably talk about that this time next week. But also NASCAR will be in Pocono, and we'll probably have our preview show up on Tuesday for that. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a good weekend.